The kiss landed before anyone could stop it. Not soft. Not hesitant. A clean, deliberate interruption. The orchestra kept playing, oblivious to the fracture ripping through the room. Violins glided through a love song that suddenly sounded obscene as every camera in the cathedral swung toward the altar. Amora Cole stepped back first. That was what stunned them. She didn't cling. Didn't apologize. Didn't look confused. She simply stepped away from Ethan Park, the groom, and stood still, as if she had already accepted whatever came next. For half a second, no one breathed. Then the whispers came. A ripple of disbelief. A nervous laugh from the back row. The sharp intake of air from the woman in white beside him. Lydia Voss. Her smile didn't collapse. It thinned. And Ethan felt it before he understood it, the wrongness of that moment settling in his chest like cold metal. Because strangers didn't do things like that. Not here. Not today. And yet, when Ethan looked into Amora's eyes, he didn't see recklessness. He saw precision. Before this goes any further, subscribe now. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what just happened wasn't romance. It was interference. Security moved. 2 men in black suits closed in from either side, hands already reaching. Amora didn't resist. She didn't turn. She didn't look at Lydia. Her eyes stayed on Ethan. Just long enough for him to see it again. Not fear. Urgency. Get her out, someone hissed. The hands on her arms tightened, guiding her away from the altar as phones rose higher, capturing the humiliation from every angle. The headlines were already forming in real time. Ethan stood frozen. Beside him, Lydia laughed softly, too softly. "Oh my God," she said, breathless. "Is this real?" She turned toward the guests, lifting a hand in theatrical disbelief. "I'm so sorry. Security will handle this." Her fingers brushed Ethan's sleeve. He flinched. She noticed. Her grip tightened. Amora was escorted through a side corridor meant for staff and emergency exits, past stunned waiters and florists who stared at her as if she were radioactive. She kept her head high. Inside the small security office, glass walls boxed her in. No windows. No distractions. Just 2 guards and a single chair. She Saturday. Hands folded. Ankles crossed. Waiting. Outside, the wedding resumed like a show forced back on schedule. The officiant cleared his throat. The orchestra restarted from the top. Ethan moved when he was prompted to. He smiled when the cameras demanded it. But something had shifted. Lydia leaned in close, whispering through her perfect teeth. "I'll have her arrested." "For what?" Ethan asked quietly. She blinked. "For trespassing. For assault. For..." "No," he said. The word landed heavier than he intended. Her eyes narrowed for half a second before she smoothed it away. "You're shaken," she said sweetly. "Anyone would be." Ethan nodded. But he wasn't shaken. He was alert. Later, after the vows, after the applause, after the carefully staged kiss between bride and groom, Ethan found himself alone in the groom's suite, staring at his reflection. The man in the mirror looked composed. Powerful. Untouched. And yet his pulse refused to slow. Because the stranger's face kept replaying in his mind. The way she'd stepped back first. The way she hadn't begged. The way Lydia's smile had faltered. That was the detail that wouldn't leave him. "Ethan," Lydia called softly through the door. "Are you coming?" "In a minute." She hesitated, then left. He waited 5 full seconds before moving. Then he walked to security. Amora stood when he entered the room. Not in panic. In respect. "You shouldn't be standing," one of the guards muttered. Ethan lifted a hand. "Leave us." They hesitated. He didn't repeat himself. The door closed. Silence settled between them. Up close, she looked ordinary. No extravagant jewelry. No trembling hands. Just controlled stillness. "I didn't mean to humiliate you," she said first. "That's not what you did," Ethan replied. Her gaze sharpened. "Good." He studied her face. "You kissed a stranger in front of 1,000 people." "Yes." "And you're calm." "Yes." "Why?" She inhaled slowly. Because if I panic now, it means I miscalculated earlier. The word struck him. Miscalculated. You planned this, he said. Yes. Ethan leaned back against the desk. You're either very brave or very stupid. She met his eyes. Or very specific. Silence stretched. Then Ethan asked the question that mattered. What did you stop? Her jaw tightened. You don't know yet, she said. But your fiancé does. The name hung between them. Lydia. Ethan felt a flicker of irritation. You expect me to believe. I expect you to check your phone, Amora said calmly. Specifically, the message you didn't receive. He frowned. She continued. At exactly 12:04 p.m., during the vows. Ethan pulled out his phone. Nothing. No missed alerts. No notifications. Amora nodded. That's because it never reached you. His pulse spiked. What message? A confirmation, she said. One that would have finalized something irreversible. He stared at her. You're speaking in riddles. Because if I speak plainly, she replied, you'll walk back out there and pretend nothing's wrong. She leaned forward slightly. And I didn't humiliate myself in front of the world for nothing. Ethan left the room without another word. He didn't return to Lydia. Instead, he walked to the private lounge reserved for executives and opened his tablet. 2 minutes later, he found it. A blocked transmission. Encrypted. Routed through a device registered to Lydia's private network. The timestamp chilled him. 12:04 p.m. During the vows. Across the hall, Lydia laughed with guests, champagne in hand. She looked radiant. Untouchable. And suddenly, Ethan saw her differently. Not as his future, but as a risk. When he returned to the security office, Amora was still there. Waiting. You're not a guest, he said. You're not staff. No. Then what are you? She hesitated. For today, she said quietly. Your interruption. He studied her face. And tomorrow? She met his gaze. That depends on what you do next. Outside, the wedding continued. Inside, something far more dangerous had begun. And Ethan Park understood, for the first time, that the kiss everyone laughed at might have saved him. Subscribe now. Because from this moment on, nothing in this marriage is accidental, and what Ethan notices next is what most powerful men miss until it's too late. The reception glittered like nothing had happened. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light across polished marble floors. Guests laughed, toasted, congratulated. The wedding staff moved with flawless efficiency, trained to protect appearances at all costs. Ethan Park stood among them like a man observing a foreign ritual. He smiled when required, nodded when spoken to, but his attention kept drifting to doors, to reflections, to Lydia. She never left his side. Not even once. Her hand stayed looped through his arm, fingers resting just above his watch, light enough to look affectionate, firm enough to feel possessive. You disappeared, she murmured, lips close to his ear. People noticed. I needed air. Her thumb pressed gently into his wrist. You could have told me. I didn't think I needed permission. She laughed, soft and melodic. You're joking. Ethan looked at her. She smiled wider. Across the room, a senior board member raised his glass in their direction. Lydia straightened instantly, posture flawless, expression radiant. She waved, leaning into Ethan as if drawn by love rather than calculation. Ethan felt it then. The performance. Every move rehearsed. Every angle controlled. And suddenly, Amora's words replayed in his head. If I speak plainly, you'll walk back out there and pretend nothing's wrong. Ethan didn't pretend. He watched. Security briefings were Lydia's domain now. That was new. Whenever Ethan paused to speak with his head of operations or legal counsel, Lydia drifted closer, her presence seamless but deliberate. We'll discuss that later, she'd say lightly. Or, let's not bore everyone with business today. Once or twice, she answered questions directed at Ethan, her tone playful, dismissive, final. No one challenged her. Not openly. Ethan excused himself under the pretense of greeting overseas partners. Instead, he took a quiet corridor toward the executive wing. His phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. You should check who has access to your private firewall. His breath slowed. He typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. In the security office, Amora sat exactly where he'd left her. Same posture. Same calm. "You're still here," he said. "I said I would be. You also said tomorrow depends on what I do next." "Yes." He closed the door behind him. "Tomorrow is still undecided." Her gaze flicked to his phone. "But today isn't." He didn't respond. She continued, carefully. "Your wife controls more than you think." "Fiancée," he corrected. "For now." The word echoed unpleasantly. Ethan lowered his voice. "You knew about the blocked transmission." "Yes." "And you knew when it would happen." "Yes." "And instead of warning me privately, you kissed me in front of everyone." "Yes." "Why?" Amora met his eyes. "Because private warnings can be erased." She leaned back slightly. "Public interruptions cannot." A knock at the door. Lydia's voice, sweet as ever. "Ethan. The photographer is asking for us." Ethan didn't answer immediately. Amora's jaw tightened. "That," she said quietly, "is what control sounds like." When Ethan emerged, Lydia's smile returned instantly. "There you are," she said, brushing imaginary lint from his jacket. "Everyone's waiting." Her eyes flicked toward the security office door. Something cold passed through them. Just for a second. The photographs took longer than necessary. Pose after pose. Smile after smile. At one point, Lydia whispered, "You're distracted." "At my own wedding," Ethan replied. She laughed again. "I can tell when something's wrong." He looked at her. "Then tell me." She tilted her head. "Tell you what?" "What you were confirming during our vows." Silence. The photographer shifted awkwardly. Lydia recovered fast. "You're tired." She turned to the camera. "Can we take 5?" They stepped aside. Her voice dropped. "You're embarrassing me." He met her gaze evenly. "You embarrassed yourself." Her smile vanished. For the first time that night, she didn't pretend. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said flatly. "Then explain the blocked message." Her eyes hardened. "You went digging." "I noticed." A pause. Then she smiled again, but this time, it didn't try to look kind. "You always did that," she said softly. "Noticing things you shouldn't." Later, as the guests moved toward the banquet hall, Ethan lingered near the balcony overlooking the city. Singapore glowed beneath them, precise, relentless, awake. Lydia joined him, champagne in hand. "You're spiraling," she said gently. "And it's not attractive." He didn't look at her. "What happens if I call off the wedding?" Her fingers tightened around the glass. "You won't." That wasn't an answer. She stepped closer. "Because you can't." He finally turned to her. "What did you trade?" Her eyes flashed. "Everything we built." "No," he said quietly. "Everything you wanted." Inside the banquet hall, Amora watched from behind the glass wall of the security office. She couldn't hear them. But she could read body language. The tension in Lydia's shoulders. The stillness in Ethan's stance. The way power shifted subtly when truth approached. She exhaled. The pressure had begun. Midway through the evening, the power flickered. Just once. A brief dimming of lights. Guests laughed it off. But Ethan didn't. Because his phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She's accelerating. That means she's scared. Ethan typed back. Of what? The reply came fast. Of losing control. Let me ask you something and answer honestly in the comments. If you were in Ethan's position right now, would you confront her publicly, or pretend everything is fine until you're sure? And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I see you. The dinner speeches began. Lydia took the microphone. Her voice carried easily, confident, practiced. She spoke of partnership, of legacy, of trust. Each word felt sharpened. Ethan listened, counting inconsistencies. When she finished, applause erupted. She leaned toward him. "Your turn." He stood. The room quieted. Ethan looked out at the faces, board members, politicians, investors. People whose loyalty shifted with information. "I'm grateful," he said evenly. "For transparency." A flicker crossed Lydia's face. He continued. "For honesty. Especially when stakes are high." The silence stretched. Then applause, uncertain, polite. Lydia's smile returned, brittle. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in the penthouse office overlooking the bay, reviewing access logs, permissions, contracts. Every trail led back to Lydia. Not directly, but deliberately. She never signed anything herself. She didn't need to. At 3:12 a.m., Ethan received a file. No message. Just data. He opened it. And finally understood what Amora had protected him from. A silent transfer of controlling shares set to execute upon marriage confirmation. Once completed, he wouldn't lose his company. He'd lose his authority. Permanent. Irreversible. Ethan closed the file. Outside, the city continued breathing. Inside, the illusion shattered. In the other wing of the penthouse, Lydia slept peacefully, believing she had won. And downstairs, in the security office, Amora waited. Because the next move wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical. Ethan didn't confront Lydia immediately. That was the first choice. Not because he was afraid of her, but because he finally understood her. People like Lydia didn't react to accusations. They reacted to leverage. And right now, she believed she had all of it. Morning arrived quietly. Singapore woke the way it always did, efficient, unbothered, indifferent to personal disasters unfolding behind tinted glass. Ethan stood at the penthouse window, coffee untouched, watching traffic thread itself into order. Behind him, Lydia moved through the bedroom with unhurried confidence. She wore one of his shirts. Barefoot. Relaxed. As if nothing in the world was slipping from her hands. "You were up late," she said casually. "Work." She hummed. "Of course." She crossed the room, wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin against his shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "marriage suits you." Ethan didn't move. Her reflection met his in the glass. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed through her eyes. Then it vanished. Later that morning, Ethan requested a private meeting with 3 people. His chief legal officer. His head of cybersecurity. And Amora Cole. He scheduled it under a neutral label, strategic review. Lydia didn't object. That was the second choice. And it told him everything. The conference room was sealed. No assistants. No recordings. Ethan sat at the head of the table. Amora sat to his right. She wore the same black dress from the wedding, now paired with a blazer borrowed from security. Her posture remained composed, but her eyes tracked every detail. She understood rooms like this. The legal officer spoke first. "You said this was urgent." Ethan nodded. "I need to understand what happens after marriage confirmation." The cyber chief frowned. "Sir." "The silent protocols," Ethan clarified. "The ones that don't trigger alerts." A pause. The cyber chief shifted uncomfortably. "Those are rarely used. But they exist." "Yes." "Who authorized them?" Another pause. The answer landed carefully. "Your fiancé." Amora exhaled quietly. Not relief. Confirmation. The legal officer leaned back. "Ethan, if what you're suggesting is true." "It is," Ethan said calmly. He slid the file across the table. The room changed. The legal officer's face drained of color as he skimmed. "This transfer," he whispered, "would have executed the moment the marriage was legally confirmed. And you'd still be CEO in title only." Silence. Amora spoke softly. "A crown without authority." Ethan didn't look at her. He was watching the legal officer. "Can it be reversed?" The answer came slowly. "No." That was the moment the room fractured. The cyber chief stood. "Sir, with respect, this is a declaration of war." Ethan nodded once. "Yes." By noon, Lydia sensed the shift. She always did. The calls she usually intercepted went unanswered. Meetings were postponed without her approval. Security patterns subtly changed. She didn't confront Ethan. She confronted Amora. They crossed paths in the corridor outside the executive wing. Lydia stopped. Amora stopped too. The silence between them felt curated. "You're still here," Lydia said lightly. "Yes. I assumed security would have escorted you out by now." "They haven't." Lydia smiled. "They will." Amora met her gaze. "Only if you tell them to." A flicker of irritation. Then composure. "You think you're important," Lydia said. "That's adorable." "I think I interrupted you," Amora replied. Lydia leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You think you saved him. I know I delayed you." Lydia straightened. "Delay doesn't change outcomes." Amora smiled faintly. "It does when people start asking questions." That afternoon, Ethan cancelled the press tour. Publicly, it was framed as exhaustion. Privately, it was containment. He spent hours in meetings, untangling alliances he'd assumed were solid. Some board members were loyal. Others, conditional. One meeting ended with a quiet threat disguised as concern. "Stability matters," a senior investor said. "Scandals cost billions." Ethan responded evenly. "So does betrayal." The man hesitated. "Choose carefully." Ethan did. By evening, Lydia lost patience. She confronted him in the penthouse living room, voice no longer gentle. "You're freezing me out. I'm reorganizing. You're destabilizing everything we planned." Ethan turned to face her fully. "We planned." She stopped. Then laughed. "You're being dramatic." He took a step closer. "You tried to strip my authority." Her smile hardened. "I tried to protect our future. By owning it. By controlling it," she snapped. "Someone had to." The mask finally dropped. "You think you built this alone," she continued. "You think your name opened every door? I did the quiet work. I made the deals you were too principled to touch." Ethan absorbed it. Then asked the question that mattered. "Who else knows?" Her eyes flickered. Too late. Downstairs, Amora listened through the glass wall of the security office as raised voices echoed faintly from above. She didn't need to hear the words. She recognized collapse when she saw it. That night, Ethan made the third choice. He invited the board. All of them. Emergency session. No explanations. Lydia watched him send the message. "You wouldn't," she said quietly. He met her gaze. "Watch me. You'll destroy us." "No," he replied. "You already tried." The boardroom was tense. Faces tight. Phones silenced. Ethan stood at the head of the table. Lydia sat to his left, perfectly still. Amora stood near the back wall, invisible to most. Ethan spoke without preamble. "I was almost stripped of my authority during my wedding." Murmurs erupted. He raised a hand. "I have evidence." The room froze. Lydia's fingers curled into her palm. The legal officer confirmed it. The cyber chief detailed the mechanisms. Every word landed like a blade. Some board members looked shocked. Others, unsurprised. That was worse. Ethan finished calmly. "I am calling for an immediate vote." "On what?" Lydia asked. "On whether this company tolerates internal coups." Silence. Then the vote began. Hands rose. Some hesitated. Some chose carefully. In the end, the count was close. Too close. The board fractured. No clear victory. Just exposed fault lines. When the meeting adjourned, Lydia didn't follow Ethan home. She left with 2 board members instead. Amora watched her go. "That's bad," she said quietly. "Yes," Ethan replied. "That means she still thinks she can win." Later that night, Ethan stood alone in the penthouse. The city below shimmered, uncaring. Amora stood a few steps behind him. "You could still walk away," she said. "Let her keep part of it." "I won't," he replied. She nodded. "Then she'll escalate." He turned to her. Why are you still here? She met his eyes. Because once you choose truth, she said, power fights back. Outside, Lydia made her final call. Not to lawyers. Not to investors. But to someone who didn't appear on any ledger. Her voice was calm. It's time, she said. And somewhere deep in the city, something irreversible began moving. Subscribe now and answer this before we go any further. If exposing the truth would destroy everything you built, would you still do it? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to say where you're watching from. I'm reading every one. The city didn't know it yet, but the night was already moving against itself. Ethan Park watched Singapore from the penthouse balcony as if the skyline were a board he no longer fully controlled. Lights pulsed. Traffic flowed. Systems worked, because systems always worked right up until they didn't. Behind him, the apartment was silent. Lydia hadn't come home. That was the fourth choice Ethan made, and the most dangerous one. He didn't call her. At dawn, the first tremor hit. A senior partner pulled out of a joint venture without explanation. A regulatory inquiry appeared in his inbox, quiet, polite, devastating. An investor he trusted asked for time. Amora stood near the window, phone pressed to her ear, listening. They're testing you, she said when she hung up. Seeing how fast you bleed. Ethan nodded. And if I do? They'll circle. He turned to her. And if I don't? They'll escalate. By noon, the media caught a scent. Not the story. Just the suggestion of one. A financial outlet ran a piece questioning governance stability following Ethan's wedding. Another hinted at internal disputes. Names weren't printed. Yet. Lydia's fingerprints were everywhere. Still invisible. Still deniable. Ethan convened his inner circle again, smaller this time. Sharper. I'm not trading favors, he said evenly. I'm exposing facts. A board member leaned forward. That will split us. It already has. Another asked the question no one wanted to voice. What if she releases her own version first? Amora answered. Then truth becomes noise. The room stilled. Ethan exhaled. We move tonight. The gala was Lydia's idea months ago. A charity event. Global press. Perfect optics. She didn't cancel it. That told Ethan everything. The venue shimmered with money and intention. Crystal, silk, smiles that cost millions. Lydia arrived first, regal, unbothered, devastatingly composed. She wore black, not mourning. Strategy. Ethan entered minutes later. Cameras exploded. For the briefest moment, their eyes met across the room. No anger. No fear. Just calculation. Amora stood off to the side, headset low against her ear, watching patterns, who spoke to whom, who avoided whom, who stayed too close to Lydia for too long. She brought reinforcements, Amora murmured. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks. Good. The program began. Applause. Introductions. Purposeful distraction. When Lydia took the stage, the room leaned in. She spoke about impact. About vision. About trust. Each word felt sharpened. Ethan waited. Then it was his turn. He didn't smile. The room felt it. I won't take long, he said. Because clarity shouldn't. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. I owe my success to transparency, he continued. Which is why tonight, I'm sharing something uncomfortable. Lydia's expression didn't change. During my wedding, Ethan said calmly, an attempt was made to alter the control structure of my company without my consent. Gasps. Phones lifted. Lydia finally turned her head. Slowly. Ethan raised a hand. The evidence has been verified. A screen behind him lit up. Documents. Timelines. Access logs. Names blurred except one. The silence was violent. Lydia stood. You're spiraling, she said lightly. And embarrassing yourself. Ethan didn't look at her. He looked at the room. Anyone who participated is free to explain themselves. No one moved. That was the moment Lydia realized something crucial. He wasn't bluffing. Security shifted. Not toward Amora. Toward Lydia. She laughed, short, incredulous. You can't do this. I already have, Ethan replied. She leaned in, voice low. You'll regret it. He met her gaze. So will you. What happened next wasn't loud. It was precise. Phones buzzed across the room as outlets published simultaneously. Investigations went public. Alliances froze. Lydia's power evaporated in real time. She stood alone. Still composed. Still dangerous. Outside, sirens cut the night. Inside, donors fled. Ethan stepped down from the stage and walked toward Lydia. Up close, she finally let the mask slip. You chose her, she said quietly. No, he replied. I chose truth. She smiled sadly. Truth doesn't protect you. He answered just as softly. It did today. Lydia was escorted out, not arrested, not humiliated. Removed. Which made her more dangerous than ever. Later, in the empty hall, Amora exhaled for the first time all night. You won, she said. Ethan shook his head. No. He looked at the doors Lydia had disappeared through. I survived. Back at the penthouse, dawn returned again, this time heavier. Ethan poured 2 glasses of water. Handed one to Amora. Why me? He asked. Why stop it? She hesitated. Because I've seen what happens when powerful lies go uninterrupted. He waited. She didn't say more. On Ethan's phone, a final message arrived. Unknown number. This isn't over. You exposed me. Now I expose you. Attached, a video file. Ethan didn't open it. Not yet. Amora's eyes widened as she read the preview text. That's bad, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Yes, he said. That means she still has one move left. Outside, the city kept breathing. Unaware that the real war was just beginning. If you want part 2, you already know what to do. Like this video, subscribe, and comment part 2, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. Because what Lydia releases next changes everything.